My name is Emily Carter, and I learned the hard way that sometimes, the people meant to love you most are the first to break you. I was 19, standing in the shimmering foyer of our house on the north side of Chicago. The chandeliers glowed like frozen stars above my head, the marble floors polished to perfection. My high school diploma was still in my hand, my cap slightly crooked, and for a second I thought, just for a second, that maybe tonight, I would finally make my father proud. Instead, I watched him turn away. Charles Carter, head of Carter Atelier, the fashion brand that clothed half of Chicago's elite, looked at me as if I were a stranger. My mother, Lorraine, held a glass of champagne and refused to meet my eyes. The silence between us was louder than any argument we'd ever had. I had just told them that I wasn't going to art school or business school, that I wanted to study computer science. I wanted to code. To build things. To create a world that existed not on fabric and runways, but inside screens and data. My father's face went stiff, his jaw tightening until the veins on his neck showed. Computer science, he said slowly, like the words themselves were offensive. You're joking. I wasn't. I told him I'd been accepted to the University of Illinois for engineering. He laughed. It wasn't the laugh of a proud father, it was cold, cruel. You can barely match your shoes. You think you can build a machine? My sister, Ava, was standing by the staircase, draped in silk and confidence. She smirked. Dad, don't be so hard on her. Maybe she can design apps for thrift stores. My mother tried to sip her drink, pretending not to hear. Something inside me broke quietly, like glass cracking beneath the weight of silence. I'm serious, I said, my voice shaking. I want to make my own way. My father put down his glass and looked at me the way he looked at interns who disappointed him. You'll never be one of us, Emily. Not with those ideas. He turned and walked away. That night, I packed a single suitcase. My mother came into my room while I folded my old clothes into a duffel bag. She stood at the door, her perfume heavy in the air, her hands trembling slightly. I thought she might stop me. Instead, she said softly, "You're embarrassing your father. Maybe some distance will help you grow up." I looked up at her, the woman who once brushed my hair before school, who used to tell me bedtime stories about brave women who changed their worlds. Now she couldn't even look at me. When I walked out the front door, no one stopped me. It was raining. Cold, relentless, Chicago rain. I walked past the shining cars in the driveway, past the gate, and into the city I thought would swallow me whole. But it didn't. It taught me how to fight. The first few months were chaos. I rented a small apartment in Pilsen, barely 200 square feet with thin walls and a leaky sink. The paint peeled off the corners, and sometimes the lights flickered when the heat kicked in. But it was mine. I took a job at a corner cafe, wiping tables and serving coffee to people in suits. Every night, when the shop closed, would sit at one of the tables with my secondhand laptop, teaching myself how to code from free tutorials and open forums. The city hummed outside, indifferent and alive, and I clung to that indifference like oxygen. There were nights when I wanted to quit. Nights when the hunger hurt more than the loneliness. I missed my family even though they hadn't really been one for years. I'd lie awake and imagine my sister modeling new designs, my father giving speeches about legacy and excellence, my mother pretending I didn't exist. But every time I thought about calling home, I remembered his voice, "You'll never be one of us." And something in me hardened. I started freelancing, small jobs fixing websites for local bakeries, mom-and-pop stores, even a used bookstore that paid me in cash and free coffee. The money was laughable, but it felt like progress. I wasn't waiting for permission anymore. That's when I met Robert Lynn. He was older, mid-40s, a software engineer renting the desk next to mine at a cheap co-working space downtown. I overheard him muttering one morning, cursing at his laptop. His company's database had crashed, and the developer had quit. Without thinking, I leaned over and asked, "Can I take a look?" He gave me a skeptical look, but he moved aside. 20 minutes later, I fixed it. Robert stared at me, half amused, half stunned. "How did you?" "Just logic," I said. He offered me a coffee, then a contract. A month later, I was working part-time on his data team. It paid next to nothing, but for the first time, someone didn't see me as a disappointment. Robert became something like a mentor. He taught me how to write cleaner code, how to think in systems, how to survive in an industry that pretends to be open but isn't. He was quiet, methodical, patient, the exact opposite of my father. He once told me, "Consistency outlives talent, Emily. Remember that." I did. For years. At 24, I landed a junior position at a small Chicago startup. The CEO was 29, brilliant, and exhausted. He didn't care about pedigree, only output. I worked 12-hour days, ate ramen at my desk, and lived on caffeine and hope. I wasn't good yet, but I was relentless. By 25, I'd been promoted twice. I rented a slightly bigger apartment with real windows and a working heater. I even bought a secondhand couch. It was small progress, but every inch of it was mine. Then the company folded. Overnight. The investors pulled out. Everyone got laid off. I remember sitting on my floor that night, staring at the cardboard box with my things inside. I felt like I'd been punched. I thought of my father's words again, how certain he was that I'd fail. And for a second, I wondered if he'd been right. But then I opened my laptop. I didn't apply for jobs. I started sketching ideas for my own product, something simple that could help small businesses manage their data without paying for overpriced corporate tools. I had no plan, no money, no investors. Just code, coffee, and stubbornness. I called it NuvraTech. The first prototype crashed every hour. The second one was worse. I cried, swore, almost quit. But something inside me kept whispering, "Keep going." Every time I fixed one bug, two more appeared. I learned patience the way people learn pain, slowly, repeatedly, until it becomes familiar. 6 months later, I launched a beta version. 10 small clients signed up. Then 20. A small angel investor offered me a chance, $50,000 to keep building. I took it and poured everything I had into it. I built my team, Maya, a developer who just lost her job, Devin, a marketer who could talk anyone into anything. We worked from a rented basement with water stains on the ceiling. Every time it rained, we had to move the computers to avoid leaks. We joked that the building cried when we did. The days blurred into nights. But slowly, something began to take shape. The app started working. The clients stayed. The numbers rose. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. Still, at night, when the office went quiet and the screens dimmed, I'd sometimes catch my reflection in the glass, hair tied back, eyes tired, heart steady, and wonder if my parents ever thought about me. Did they see the news articles about NuvraTech? Did they know the girl they disowned was now running a company worth millions? Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't. But 11 years after the night they turned their backs on me, I got my answer. It arrived in an envelope, thick, ivory, gold embossed. The Carter Atelier 25th Anniversary Gala. I froze. I hadn't spoken to any of them in over a decade. And now, they wanted me there. I turned the envelope in my hands for what felt like hours, the words blurring. Was it guilt? Or was it arrogance, an invitation sent just to remind me of where I came from, and where I didn't belong? But a quiet voice inside me said, go. Not to reconcile. To remember. And to show them that I'd built a world without their name on it. I booked the flight to Chicago that same night. The city looked different now, colder, cleaner, quieter. The skyline I used to stare at from my tiny apartment window felt like an old photograph, distant and familiar all at once. 11 years is a long time, but the ache of that last night never really left. The gala was at the Millennium Hotel downtown, the kind of place where chandeliers hang like frozen rain and every surface glitters with money. As the car pulled up to the entrance, I could already hear the hum of expensive laughter spilling out through the glass doors. Cameras flashed outside, catching Chicago's wealthiest as they smiled and waved. I took one deep breath before stepping out. My heels clicked against the marble steps like small, steady drums. I wore a long black gown, simple, unbranded, made for power, not approval. When I entered the ballroom, heads turned. Some faces lit up with recognition, others whispered my name like it was gossip. I scanned the room and saw them. Ava stood near the stage, shimmering in silver. My father was surrounded by investors, shaking hands, charming them with that same perfect smile. My mother stood beside him, her hand on his arm, her pearls glowing under the chandelier. They looked every bit the royal family they'd always wanted to be. Until they saw me. Ava froze first, her eyes widening before she forced a practiced grin. Emily, she said, her voice sweet as syrup. Well, this is a surprise. Good to see you too, I said calmly. Her husband Mark turned toward me, extending a hand. Emily Carter, right? NuvraTech? I've heard about you. Ava's jaw tightened. Oh, she's been keeping busy, she said. Busy changing the tech world, I corrected, smiling lightly. Ava's eyes flickered. For a moment, the room felt smaller. My parents approached soon after. My father looked older, thinner. My mother's smile was brittle, stretched too tight. Emily, he said flatly. I didn't expect you to come. I got your invitation, I replied. I figured it was time. Time for what? My mother asked softly. To stop pretending the past didn't happen. The tension was invisible but heavy, like static before a storm. Around us, people mingled, oblivious to the quiet war breaking out in the corner of the ballroom. My father cleared his throat. Let's try to be civil tonight. It's a celebration. For you, I said. Not for me. He stared at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. I suppose you're proud of yourself now. I built something without your money, I said. So yes. I am. He gave a dry smile. You sound like me when I was young. No, I said softly. You sound like someone who's still trying to convince himself he didn't lose his daughter. Before he could answer, the host's voice boomed across the room, announcing the start of the evening. My father and Ava moved toward the stage, leaving me standing there in a swirl of chatter and champagne. I found my seat at one of the tables near the back. I didn't come to celebrate. I came to witness. Halfway through the speeches, I felt a tap on my shoulder. A man in a navy suit smiled at me. You're Emily Carter, right? The CEO of NuvraTech? I nodded cautiously. I'm Felix Grant, he said, shaking my hand. I used to work for your father. My pulse quickened. Used to? He nodded. I left years ago. But I wanted to tell you something before the night ends. It might not surprise you, but your father tried to ruin you. The words hit like a stone to the chest. He told several firms in the city not to hire you, Felix continued quietly. Said you were unstable, that you couldn't handle pressure. I know because I heard him say it. He wanted to make sure no one gave you a chance. My hands trembled slightly around my glass. I'd suspected sabotage, but hearing it confirmed still burned. Why are you telling me this now? Felix gave a small, almost apologetic smile. Because he's losing control of his empire, and he knows it. You deserve to know how far he went. And I thought you'd like to hear it from someone who finally decided to stop protecting him. Before I could respond, a woman joined us, tall, sharp suit, composed. Emily Carter, she said, extending a hand. Vivian Ellis. I'm an attorney for a corporate ethics board investigating intellectual property disputes. I think we need to talk. I frowned. About what? She took out her phone and showed me a document. Ava Carter filed a patent 6 months ago for a data integration algorithm used in your father's new line of smart textiles. The code structure matches a prototype developed by NuvraTech. My stomach dropped. That's my algorithm, I whispered. Vivian nodded. I know. I cross-checked it myself. She copied your framework almost line for line. The noise of the gala faded behind me, replaced by the low hum of anger and disbelief inside my head. I stared across the ballroom at Ava, laughing near the stage, basking in the lights. Something in me snapped, not in rage, but in resolve. I stood, thanked Vivian, and walked straight toward the stage. Ava noticed me approaching and stiffened. Emily, what are you? You stole my work, I said, my voice low but steady. Her smile faltered. What are you talking about? Don't do that, I said. Don't pretend. People around us started to glance over. Mark looked confused. Ava, what's going on? I held up my phone, showing him the document Vivian had sent me. That's my code. Your wife's been using it to build her new product line. Mark blinked, then looked at Ava. Is that true? She forced a laugh. This is ridiculous. But her hands were shaking. I stepped closer. You could have asked. You could have said you were proud. But instead, you did what this family always does. You took what wasn't yours and called it genius. Her voice rose. You think you're better than us now? No, I said. Just different. I had to earn everything you were handed. Cameras began turning in our direction. Guests whispered. The host faltered mid-speech. Mark stepped back, realizing the truth before she even admitted it. You lied to me, he said quietly. To everyone. The color drained from her face. And just like that, the Carter family's perfect image started to crack under the lights. I left before the night was over. The next morning, the story was everywhere. Carter empire accused of theft, daughter's code stolen. News anchors dissected my speech from the gala. Investors panicked. Shares of Carter Atelier plummeted. My inbox flooded with reporters asking for interviews. I didn't give any. I sat alone in my hotel room, watching the city wake up through the fogged window, the headlines scrolling across the screen. I should have felt triumphant, but I didn't. When power collapses, it doesn't make a sound. It just fades. Later that week, my father called. Emily, he said quietly, his voice stripped of arrogance. We need to talk. I agreed to meet at a small cafe near the river. He and my mother were already there when I arrived, both looking smaller than I remembered. Lorraine's eyes were red. My father's suit was rumpled, his hair unkempt. He looked like a man finally out of rehearsed words. We're sorry, he said first. For everything. For the things we said. For what Ava did. I didn't come for apologies, I said softly. Then what do you want? I wanted to see if you'd look me in the eyes and admit it. He did. We were wrong. For the first time in my life, I believed him. But belief didn't erase the years between us. I built my life without you, I said. And I survived. I don't need to rebuild what you broke. Lorraine reached across the table, her hand trembling. We lost more than a company, she whispered. We lost our family. I pulled back gently. You lost it the night you told me to leave. Silence hung between us. Outside, the river kept moving, indifferent and endless. I stood, placing a few bills on the table. Take care of yourselves, I said. As I walked away, I heard my mother start to cry. My father didn't stop her. Back at my office, things were moving fast. NuvraTech's growth doubled overnight. New investors called. My team cheered. The world was finally giving me everything I'd worked for. But as I watched the celebrations, I felt something hollow settle in my chest. Success, I realized, can't replace what's been lost. It can only cover it, like fresh snow over broken ground. Weeks later, I read that Ava had fled to Europe, her reputation in ruins. Mark divorced her quietly. My parents sold their mansion, moving into a smaller house by the lake. Their empire was gone, their legacy reduced to headlines and silence. And me? I was at the top. But when the noise faded, when the office emptied and the lights dimmed, I'd catch my reflection in the window and feel that old ache again. I'd won. But the victory tasted bitter. Sometimes I'd think about calling my mother. Sometimes I even picked up the phone. But I never dialed. Because what would I say? That I missed them? That I forgave them? That none of this mattered anymore? Forgiveness doesn't always mean returning. Sometimes it's just not carrying the weight anymore. One rainy evening, I walked along the Chicago River, coat pulled tight, the city lights flickering in the water. I passed a boutique once owned by Carter Atelier. It was empty now. The windows dark. A "for lease" sign hung crooked on the glass. For a long time, I stood there, watching the rain blur my reflection with the ghosts of who I used to be. That's when it hit me, the truth I'd been chasing wasn't revenge. It wasn't even justice. It was acknowledgement. And now that I had it, it didn't change anything. You don't heal by proving someone wrong. You heal by realizing you don't need to. I took one last look at the darkened window and whispered, I made it. Then I walked away. The rain felt lighter somehow. The city, softer. At home, I opened my laptop and began drafting a new program, a platform for women who wanted to build businesses from scratch, women who'd been told they weren't enough. I named it Project Second Dawn. Maybe that's what life is, I thought. A series of second dawns. You lose one light, but another eventually finds you. If you've ever been thrown away, if you've ever had to start from nothing, remember this: success won't fill the emptiness, but it will remind you that you were always capable. And maybe that's enough. So tell me, what would you do if the people who doubted you finally saw you succeed? Would you smile? Forgive them? Or just keep walking? Whatever your answer is, make sure it's yours. Because in the end, victory isn't about being seen. It's about being free.